What are some of the things that I am looking for from the Miami Dolphins in week 3 against Seattle? We are exploring that here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Cal Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, the author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, and the NFL Draft lead for the 33rd team. You can find all of our shows here on the Locked On Network on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Tip of the cap to our everydayers, because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code in all lowercase Locked On NFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Crossover Thursday yesterday, we looked at Dolphins Seahawks week 3 matchup. And the irony, the biggest irony, I've been yelled at for using irony in an incorrect sense in the past. Maybe I will do it again here. I frankly am physically incapable of carrying this. The irony to me, based on my understanding of the word irony, injury report comes out on Wednesday. And wouldn't you know it, for the first time in 3 years, the other team had a longer injury report than the Dolphins do. But the quarterback's not going to play. The Dolphins plays Tua Tagovailoa on injured reserve. Of course they did. So I've really just kind of pushed pause on all expectations around the football team right now. And I want to see how they respond to this moment. I want to see how Mike McDaniel responds to this moment. I want to see what Skylar Thompson looks like. I want to see how the defense responds, depending on how the game script plays out, when the game script hasn't been particularly favorable over the course of the first 2 weeks. I want to see how the running game looks against a different kind of defensive front and not a familiar opponent. I want to see how they implement Tyreek Hill, Jaelan. Like, I really want to evaluate everything. We spent this entire offseason really evaluating the quarterback. What is the quarterback? What is the quarterback not? What are the risks of the quarterback? What are the rewards of the quarterback? What is the chemistry of the team with the quarterback? What is the play calling ceiling with the quarterback? Should you pay the quarterback? What is the economic cost of not paying the quarterback? We did the whole thing looking at the quarterback. And you knew there was some significant changes. You knew there was a schematic change on defense. You knew there were some players that you opted to let go for an income redistribution, as we pointed out throughout the course of the offseason. But now without the quarterback, you get a chance to evaluate everything else. And in a year like this, where, who knows when we do or don't see Tua Tagovailoa again. And I'm not going to sit here and assume, based on his head injury history and the fact that he's been placed on IR, which in itself is a pretty unique set of circumstances for a concussion and how the league's policies and the concussion protocol works. I'm not going to sit here and assume we're going to get to the Cardinals game and Tua's going to come back off of IR and be ready to go and play. I'm not going to assume that. So we're pushing pause on expectations. We're pushing pause on pretty much everything. And we're going to go back to the evaluation mode of everything that's happening with this team. And it's a good opportunity to do that, because if you don't like what you see, you're going to have a pretty good body of work to understand why you don't like what you see and what needs to change for the long-term benefit of the team. And I think specifically on offense, seeing for Mike McDaniel, and I'm not the first person to bring this talking point up, but Mike McDaniel being praised as the innovative offensive mind that he is, I think is totally fair. But now is your time to show it. Now is your time to show that you can win in more ways than one. Now's the time to show that you have a self-awareness of what your team and what your players are and aren't. And he was hired in large part to optimize and maximize the team's investment in a quarterback. And that's what good teams do. They put that player with that investment at the most important position in sports in position to be successful. But you also have to have some level of translatability and cannot be so reliant, even if it's not the same way of doing things, on an individual player to have all of your success. Because if that's the case, then you've put yourself completely in a corner. Because there's only one player that will run the offense the way that you want it run. And if you can't call the offense a different way or change the barometers in which you're operating your offense, you're always going to be one hit away from being in the position that you would be in a worst case scenario. I'm looking forward to evaluating Skylar Thompson. We saw he had the good performance with the worst players in the third preseason game. He really felt like that helped push him to win the backup job. I'd like to think Mike McDaniel, with the rest of the talent on the offense, can do what the Bengals did last year with Jake Browning. Jake Browning, they kind of brought him in and had some training wheels with how they operated last year when Joe Burrow went down midseason, and they won some games. He ultimately finishes 4-3 as the starter, completes 70% of his passes, took sacks on 9% of his dropbacks. So that's certainly a contrast with Joe and Joe's ability to navigate and feel pressure, and Jake's not that. But they end up finishing 9-8 on the season, just on the outside cusp of the playoff picture, and Browning has a winning record in 7 games. I can look over at Cincinnati and certainly feel like Miami has a more balanced offense than Cincinnati does. They had Jamar Chase, they had T. Higgins, they had Tyler Boyd, but they haven't had success running the ball in forever. And Miami's the best thing they've done offensively this season is run the football. So if a team like Cincinnati can do it, I look at the Dolphins and I look at what they have and their ability to run the ball and the wide receivers that they have. And yeah, I kind of have an expectation that, like, if you're Mike McDaniel, the offensive innovator and genius that we heap the praise to you to be, this offense is going to keep its head above water. It's maybe not going to be what it could be at its best, and certainly not run the way that it's been shown to run over the last 2 years with Tua quarterback. But if it doesn't, that raises some questions, right? But what better time to evaluate? And there's a lot of coaches that have kind of gone through hard times. And I think the unfortunate thing for Miami is their optimal window in each of the last 2 years, in 22 and 23. And they very easily could have won 12 games in 22 if they didn't deal with the quarterback injuries and they didn't deal with all of the injuries at the end of the season and kind of limp into the playoffs the way that they did and then go up to Buffalo in the wild card round. The unfortunate thing, and sometimes good results don't have or good process doesn't have good results. And I genuinely look at what the Dolphins have done over this past sample size of years, and I think it's largely been good process. There's been missteps, there's been misinvestments, and Bill Belichick just mentioned that he was on, I forget which of the shows that he's doing now that he did this. He was talking with Chris Long and Chad Ochocinco. He said, you got to get the evaluation of your guys in the building right. And you're going to miss on players in the draft. You're going to miss in free agency because sometimes the fit's not right. And I think you see some of that in some key moments, perhaps with the Dolphins over this stretch of time. But I think they've largely had good process. And the unfortunate thing is it hasn't yielded the postseason breakout that we hoped that it would. Where you compare that to the Rams and Sean McVay is another coach off this coaching tree. And they win the Super Bowl with Matt Stafford after getting close and not getting it done. They have their breakthrough, and the wheels fell off the bus the following year. They were horrible. They were really banged up. They were injured, and they made some significant philosophical changes and shifts off of that. Is that the road the Dolphins are going to take? I don't know. I think the next month's probably going to give you a lot of direction on which way this year's going to go. And a lot of that evaluation starts in Seattle. How about on defense? What are we looking for on defense against Seattle? That is next here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you stick with us. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, we have something a little different for you now through September 22nd. So this weekend, all FanDuel customers can get $5 and get a free 3-week trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. And with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. Visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. The line for this game currently sitting at Dolphins plus 4.5 against Seattle with a game total of over under 41.5 total points. We shall see. Visit FanDuel.com to get America's #1 sportsbook and get in on the action for yourself. I thought Jaelan Phillips' comments this week were pretty interesting. And Jaelan Phillips, obviously, stand-up individual, right? I think he's a future Walter Payton Man of the Year type of player for the impact he brings to the community. And he gets a lot of stuff. But he shared a few posts on the heels of that game on Thursday about his own individual performance and talked about his own value of his self-worth and struggling to detach that from his performance on the field. And I thought Jaelan Phillips didn't necessarily play a bad game. When I went back and graded the tape, I thought, maybe the slip on the big play that put the Bills down on the 1-yard line where Javon Holland drives on the scramble drill and leaves deep coverage, and Jalen Ramsey has to try to run with the running back on a rail out of the backfield late and try to recover to interrupt that. And Jalen lost his footing on that play, and Josh Allen gets outside and buys time and hits the throw down the field. But I didn't think Jaelan Phillips played a bad game. I thought he was one of the best players on the field against Jacksonville. So there's that dip and that mental health and battle for Jalen being really real. He clarified, said the purpose of the post wasn't to garner sympathy or complain. It was to show people that you can experience human emotions and still persevere. It's about how you respond. Talking about your emotions isn't soft, men. Don't listen to anyone who tells you that it is. First of all, really appreciate the message. I appreciate the transparency for Jaelan Phillips. And he feels like the kind of player I kind of expect we're going to have a bit of a bounce back from. Really good against Jacksonville. Didn't have his best game against Buffalo. Little extra time. Was a full participant in practice on Thursday after being limited with the Achilles and the recovery from the Achilles. I think a little bit of extra time for him amidst his own individual situation. I'm looking for a big game from Jaelan Phillips. And Seattle, for being 2-0 and having the successes that they've had this season, and as good as Geno Smith has been, they have been a group that has yielded a lot of pressure up front. The Patriots dogged those dudes up front. And Geno persevered in his own way and played through it. But just watching this week unfold for Jaelan Phillips individually and him talk about his own feelings and emotions after a game and a performance and knowing the kind of guy that he is and being wired the way that he is, my eyes are going to be on 15. And I kind of had big expectations for a big bounce back week from Jaelan Phillips. Also wondering who in the secondary, who's going to be the player that makes the splash play. I thought the Dolphins defense did play with a lot of pride down the stretch in week 2. They obviously were very effective in the second half against Jacksonville as well. You got to continue to smooth out the bumps and the miscommunications, and with the new scheme and learning on the fly, that's going to be a thing, right? But this Dolphins defense, they haven't logged an interception in the first 2 weeks. And you've played good quarterbacks in Trevor Lawrence and Josh Allen, but still, you'd like to think a team that can play with some pressure and play aggressive and has talent in the secondary, and putting those guys in positions to take matchups and be successful. You did see Jalen Ramsey move around a little bit more in week 2 than he did in week 1. Now you're coming off of getting a week and a half of kind of reset and rest, and sounds like everybody's going to be healthy on that side of the ball. Who's going to make some plays? That's what I'm watching. There's guys that are getting paid, like Jalen Ramsey. There's guys that want to get paid. David Long in a contract year, Javon Holland in a contract year, Jaelan Phillips eligible for an extension, but coming off of an injury. There's a lot of subplots for, regardless of what direction this season decides to go or not go for the Dolphins. There's a lot of talent available that the Dolphins need to make decisions on in the next 8 months. Those individual, and I think that's the biggest difference. Say this season goes to hell, right? Say the season completely goes to hell. They can't play complimentary football games because the quarterback misses an extended period of time and the game scripts don't flow and Mike refuses to change and everything goes crazy, right? Say you get a worst case scenario. Hypothetically, I'm not saying it's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. I think the biggest encouraging thing that I have to look at is no matter what happens from here, this team has an established young nucleus of talent with young players. Now they're paying older players too, right? But that can be a short-term thing if you want it to be a short-term thing. They have a strong young nucleus of talent that they can work with moving forward. And what they choose to do with that, we shall see. But I want to know on defense who steps up, makes plays. Because you got leaders on that side of the ball. You got guys that are looking to get paid on that side of the ball. What direction does the pressure of what's your compensation or lack of compensation or lack of long-term security, what does that do for you individually as players? It's a big subplot for kind of the future, what the Dolphins' defensive depth chart looks like. Now, we're going to get into kind of my experience covering the team here as I reflect with this latest kind of bump in the road, and bump in the road is putting it mildly, but just kind of a state of the union, if you will, as far as our Dolphin fanhood is what we're going to bring to a close as we get ready for our first game of the year without the Dolphins starting quarterback in Seattle. That's next. Stick with us. If you're looking to get in on some of the action this weekend, make sure you play with PrizePicks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active users. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers, not you against all of the other users. All you need to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch your winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. And in the month of September, one Caleb Williams passing yard gets you one win on PrizePicks each and every week. So let the #1 overall pick do some of the legwork for you. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you pay $5. That's LOCKEDONNFL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. So I feel like that meme, and there are a lot of tortured fan bases in football. I mean, let's be completely fair. I think Minnesota is a team that comes to mind. A lot of heartache in the postseason, hasn't won a Super Bowl. They get their own first-round quarterback this year, and he goes down after looking great in the preseason with a meniscus. Now, we'll see what Sam Darnold does. He's been balling out early this season, and credit to them for that. The Jets are another tortured fan base. Kind of experienced the kind of gut punch early in the year after a lot of optimism last year that a lot of Dolphins fans are feeling now. Jets looked good yesterday against the New England Patriots, although I think some of that was more about the Patriots not looking good, but the Jets certainly looked good at home against New England. And Aaron Rodgers looked like he wound the clock back 10 years. So we'll see what that team continues to do this year as well. But man, just in my tenure covering the Dolphins, even just with this podcast, right? Like I took over in the build up to the 2020 draft. And I remember doing all the quarterbacks. And then in 2021, I remember doing, here's all the players that I think are the options for the Dolphins to get their weapons right because they don't have any weapons. And here's who I pick, and so on and so forth. But over this stretch of time, you have the decision to draft a quarterback in 2020, but then that's paired with the Fitz drama in 2020 with Tua and pulling him in and out of the lineup. And then in 2021, there's all of the Deshaun Watson rumors that happen. And then there's the firing of Brian Flores and the lawsuit that comes with the firing of Brian Flores and the tampering and the being stripped of draft picks. And then there's the first saga in 2022 with the concussions with Tua. And then 2023 kind of comes and goes. And then 2024, we're right back in the concussion saga for Tua Tagovailoa all over again. It's been body blow after body blow for the last couple of years, as far as just covering the team. Can we get some sense of normalcy? And with 32 teams and all the people that are affiliated with all the teams, there are crazy stories with just about every team across the league. There's different direct links, though. Kansas City's weirdest story over the last couple of years was they had a super fan who went on a bank robbing spree in the Midwest. And then for Miami, this latest saga is just the latest, and it feels like the meme of stop, the football gods, stop giving us your hardest battles. And there have been teams over this 5-year stretch that have been much more tortured than we have, right? We experienced 4 consecutive winning seasons, back-to-back playoff berths. Now, we are now the team that owns the drought with the longest consecutive years without a playoff win. And getting that dumped on top of and being close and feeling like you're there and then not doing it is a whole different level of bittersweet. But I hope in the midst of all of that, those of you who continue to listen to the show, and when stuff's not good with the Dolphins, listenership's not what it is when stuff's going good. And I don't know how regular that is versus every team across the league and the rest of the network that we have here on Locked On. But I know definitively from my experience, when things get tough, those of you who show up and are diehards on a daily basis, I really appreciate those of you who are part of that. And those of you who I assume are listening on a Friday before a week 3 game with your starting quarterback who you just made a big financial commitment to being out and on injured reserve for his 3rd documented concussion in the last 2 years and potentially 4th. Over that stretch of time, and the complete future of that player being completely unknown, and what was a rough start to the year in general offensively in a lot of different measures, and you're one of the most penalized teams of football. You have almost twice as many penalties and twice as many penalty yards called against you as the other teams have gotten. Going's been tough here, and I think what my thought is in the midst of that is this is the opportunity that I needed to kind of zoom out and look at exactly where this team is at. And I've been very invested because I'm very much a believer of anything that you're doing, you need to do with conviction if you're running a team and you're trying to get football operations in place and put players in the best positions to be successful. But we are going to be a little bit more analytically driven over the next couple of weeks while we figure out what direction this season's going to go. And I'll be honest, there's something broken in my brain with just this being yet another like bump in the road. This one's kind of hit, and it certainly changed my perspective on this season. Now, we're still going to be here every day, and we're going to break down the team. But, man, the evaluation period has kind of begun. Because after so many bumps and several years of being invested in the direction of the team, this one happening this early in the season with the magnitude of what it potentially means for Tua Tagovailoa as the starting quarterback of the Dolphins, I think you'd be a fool to turn a blind eye to it and act like that all of the outcomes are not on the table. And that includes maybe he is back in 4 weeks. But what if he's not? What if he does choose to retire? What does that mean for the Dolphins? What does that mean for the direction of the team? Like all of those things, and playing on a Thursday and then waiting till 4:00 on Sunday, I don't think helps because it's an extra couple of days to sit here and really process everything. But this latest hardest battle has certainly left its mark on me, and I think you will probably see that in the tone of how we look at this team over the next couple of weeks. But those of you who are showing up for yet another one of the football gods' hardest battles that they can possibly hand out to us as Dolphins fans, I see you guys and I appreciate you guys. And I hope you can view the game through the same lens as we figure out exactly how significant the shift in the path of the team is, because we don't know. Sunday afternoon will be the first step. You keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. We don't just say it. We live it. I'm Kyle Krabs, your host here on Locked On Dolphins. Appreciate you guys checking out the show. You can find it on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Make it a great rest of your day. I'll talk to you after the Dolphins play in Seattle against the Seahawks.